It's funny how we live in this world where everyone's always talking about being fair and upfront.
Right.
But then if you kind of look a little closer, sometimes it feels like that whole dance of power and influence.
Yeah.
Like it never really went away, and it reminds me of what Machiavelli said all those years ago about how people in court had to seem all virtuous and good, but also be smart and tough behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder if that whole act of looking one way while acting another is still going on today in all sorts of situations.
I think what's so interesting is that this kind of dynamic seems to be everywhere.
Right.
Across history, you see it again and again.
Yeah.
And across cultures, too. This whole interplay between how things appear versus the strategy underneath. It's not like some new thing we just came up with.
Right.
It seems like a fundamental part of how humans interact.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at how people get and then hold on to influence.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Yep.
We've got this really cool collection of insights from a book called The 48 Laws of Power. Think of it like a behind-the-scenes tour of all the strategies people have used throughout history to get ahead.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking everything from military masterminds like Sun Tzu and Clausewitz to smooth-talking diplomats like Bismarck and Talleyrand.
Okay.
And we're even going to look at the techniques of seducers and con artists.
Interesting.
It's like a panoramic view of how the power game really works.
I like that.
So for you, the listener, just to be super clear, we're not trying to create some handbook for being ruthless and dominating everyone.
Right.
It's more about understanding the forces at play in any situation where influence is a factor.
Yes.
It's like getting a practical awareness, almost like a strategic awareness of how the world truly operates, beyond all those social niceties and appearances.
Yeah.
Our goal is to really distill the key takeaways from these different examples. And a lot of them are pretty surprising.
Interesting.
We want to give you a shortcut to being truly informed about these dynamics.
Right.
So you can navigate your own life with more awareness and effectiveness.
Okay.
Without getting bogged down in like a ton of historical details.
That makes sense.
So how about we jump right in?
Sure.
Where do we even begin unpacking all of this?
Well, the book starts with some fundamental ideas about how we present ourselves.
Okay.
And I think right from the get-go, there's this interesting tension between some of these core principles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the very first law, never outshine the master. It immediately makes you think, how does anyone ever get ahead?
Right.
If they're always downplaying their accomplishments around people in charge.
Yeah, that does feel kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You'd think showing your strengths is the way to go.
You would think.
But the examples in the book are pretty eye-opening.
Okay, like what?
Well, take Louis XIV and his finance minister, Fouquet. Fouquet wanted to impress the king. So he throws this absolutely massive party.
A party?
Yeah, like a legendary party.
Okay.
I mean, the food, the entertainment, the sheer opulence of everything.
Yeah.
All the top people in Europe were there.
It sounds impressive.
Oh, it was. But then what happened? Fouquet gets arrested right after?
Seriously?
Yeah, accused of embezzlement.
No way.
Which is kind of ironic since he spent so much to honor the king.
That's wild.
Then who replaced him? Colbert.
Okay.
Someone who was much less flashy, by all accounts.
I see.
So the idea here seems to be that Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, he needed to be the undisputed center of attention.
Of course.
Fouquet's brilliance, his grand gesture, it accidentally made the king look less impressive in comparison.
So it made him feel insecure.
Exactly. And this wasn't just limited to royal courts either.
Oh, really?
The story of Emperor Hideyoshi and Senno Rikyu in Japan, it shows that this dynamic played out across different cultures, too.
Interesting.
Rikyu was this revered master of the tea ceremony, like a close confidant of the emperor. And he was very respected, even had a place within the palace grounds.
Wow.
But then he made a seemingly small mistake.
What did he do?
He commissioned a statue of himself.
A statue?
Yeah, and the statue showed him wearing noble sandals.
Okay.
And he had it displayed prominently.
So what was wrong with that?
Well, in the strict hierarchy of that time, to Hideyoshi, it was like Rikyu was forgetting his place.
I see.
Acting as if his status was his own.
Yeah.
Instead of something granted to him by the emperor.
Right.
It was seen as a huge act of disrespect.
Wow. So what happened?
Rikyu was ordered to commit suicide.
Oh, my gosh.
It's a tough lesson to learn.
It is.
Even when you're in favor.
Yeah.
Never assume your position is safe.
Right.
And always be mindful of the egos at play, especially around those with more power.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about not outshining the master.
Right.
But then law 6 is court attention at all cost.
Mm.
How do we reconcile those two seemingly opposite ideas?
Well, I think that's where the strategic thinking comes in.
Okay.
Never outshine the master is more about your direct interactions with those who have power over you.
Right.
But court attention at all cost is about building a broader base of influence.
Okay.
It's about making sure people notice you.
I got it.
In a wider sphere.
That makes sense.
Like you're on people's radar in the first place.
And P.T. Barnum.
Oh, yeah.
The ultimate showman. He got this perfectly.
Yeah.
He didn't care if people were praising him or criticizing him as long as they were talking about him. He would put on these wild, over-the-top events.
Like what?
Oh, things like a buffalo hunt in New Jersey.
In New Jersey. I didn't know they had buffalo there.
Well, they didn't. It was all staged.
He sounds like a character.
He was...
So was all this stuff fake then?
A lot of it, yeah. He even invited journalists he knew would write bad reviews.
Why would he do that?
Because any attention is good attention.
Interesting.
He knew that positive or negative didn't matter as much as getting his name out there.
So that's how he became so famous.
Exactly.
Wow.
He even wrote anonymous bad reviews of his own shows.
Seriously?
Just to keep people talking.
That's amazing.
And, contrast that with someone like Thomas Edison, who also craved attention, but in a much more competitive way.
How so?
He would stage these big public demonstrations of his inventions.
Right.
And he would try to make his rival Tesla look bad.
Oh, wow.
He even refused to share a Nobel Prize with Tesla.
Really?
Just to deny him the spotlight.
That's a little harsh.
It is, and I think it shows a different type of attention-seeking.
Yeah.
Barnum was kind of playful with it, almost inviting the audience to be in on the joke, but Edison was more about dominance. Like, he had to be better than everyone else.
Interesting.
They were both effective,
but
their motivations were very different.
I see.
And we can't forget Mata Hari.
Oh, yes.
She came to Paris with almost nothing.
Okay.
But she created this mysterious persona with her exotic dances, costumes, and stories. People were completely fascinated by her.
So it wasn't just her talent.
Well, she wasn't considered the most skilled dancer or the most beautiful woman.
I see.
It was the mystery that drew people in.
The power of the unknown.
Exactly.
That's a good one.
Okay, so we've looked at managing appearances.
Right.
Now let's get into something a bit more controversial.
Okay.
The art of deception. Law 3 is conceal your intentions. And that sounds kind of manipulative,
Well, it does raise some ethical questions.
Yeah.
But the book argues that being totally transparent isn't always the best approach.
Okay.
Especially in competitive situations.
I can see that.
Sometimes you need to mask your true goals.
Right.
Not by lying outright, but by being vague or even misdirecting people.
Interesting.
And this can be a very powerful tactic.
Like how?
We'll take Bismarck, for example.
Okay.
He gave this famous speech all about his supposed dedication to peace. But he completely fooled everyone.
Really?
People genuinely thought he was a pacifist. And this allowed him to become a key minister.
Okay.
And eventually the Prussian premier.
Wow.
And from that position, he started orchestrating wars.
No way.
So he used this image of peacefulness to gain power.
And then did the opposite.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It shows you how effective misdirection can be.
Yeah.
When you focus people's attention on something that's not your real goal, you can maneuver them into a position where they won't resist your true objectives.
Wow. So it's like a subtle form of manipulation.
I guess you could say that.
And then there's the technique of false sincerity, where you make people believe in your convictions even if you don't really feel them, like we're a good actor.
Yeah, exactly.
The perfect example is Iago from Shakespeare's Othello.
Oh, yeah.
His fake concern for Desdemona, it's what drives Othello's jealousy and leads to tragedy.
Right.
And even con artists like Yellow Kid Weil.
Okay.
They use this all the time,
really?
Acting completely convinced by their own scams.
Wow.
Which makes sense when you think about it.
How so?
We tend to believe people who seem genuine in their emotions.
It's true.
If someone looks like they really believe what they're saying, we're more likely to trust them.
Right.
Which, of course, makes us vulnerable to being tricked.
Yeah.
But the book says you have to be subtle about it. If you overdo it, people will get suspicious.
That makes sense.
It's about creating a believable illusion of sincerity.
I see.
Will's cons were really elaborate.
Like what?
He once tricked a rich guy into buying a fake lodge.
A fake lodge?
Yeah, complete with hired actors. Pretending to be tough investors.
Seriously?
He even had fake boxers there to intimidate the guy.
That's incredible.
It shows how far people will go to create convincing illusions.
It does.
The key is to exploit the other person's desires, their vulnerabilities, and their preconceived notions.
Makes sense.
Now, Law 4 is always say less than necessary.
Okay.
Which seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The less you say, the less likely you are to mess up or reveal too much.
Makes sense.
But the book goes deeper.
Oh, really?
It says that speaking less can make you seem more powerful.
Interesting.
Like when you're quiet and ambiguous, it makes people wonder what you're thinking.
Right.
And they might overestimate your intelligence.
I see.
There's a story about Kondraty Ryleyev.
Okay.
He was a leader in a failed rebellion in Russia.
Okay.
And he was sentenced to death.
Oh, wow.
But when they tried to hang him, the rope broke.
Seriously?
Which was sometimes seen as a sign from God.
I can see why.
But instead of being grateful, Ryleyev said something like, in Russia, they can't even hang someone properly.
Oh, my.
He was then hanged again.
Of course.
And it makes you wonder
what?
If he had just stayed silent, maybe things would have been different.
It's possible.
The story shows the risk of talking too much.
Right.
Even if you're trying to be witty.
Yeah.
Sometimes silence is more powerful.
Absolutely.
The more you talk, the more chances you give people to twist your words.
That's a good point.
Or use them against you.
Yeah.
And then there's that fable by La Fontaine.
Which one?
The Lion and the Fox.
Okay.
It shows how powerful people can use the words of others to their advantage. Like getting them to incriminate themselves through their own speech.
That's clever.
It is.
How does that work?
Well, the fox flatters the lion and manipulates him into thinking his actions are justified.
I see.
It's a reminder that words can be used for manipulation, not just communication.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the idea of cultivating an image.
Yeah.
Law 5 is, so much depends on reputation guard with your life.
That seems like good advice.
It is.
Your reputation really does precede you. It shapes how people treat you.
Exactly. But what's interesting here is that it's not just about being competent or trustworthy. It can also be about crafting a specific persona.
Okay.
Even one that's a bit eccentric.
I like that.
To make you more memorable and influential.
Like standing out from the crowd.
Yeah, exactly.
So not just being good, but being known for something specific.
Right. And the Renaissance artist Sodoma, he's a great example.
How so?
He was known for his strange personality as much as his artistic skills.
Really?
And it seems like his eccentricities actually helped him become more famous.
Interesting.
The Pope at the time liked having unusual people around.
I guess that makes sense.
And it ties back to that idea of attracting attention. Sodoma stood out because he was different. Like there's also the story of Gossart, who wore a ridiculous paper costume.
A paper costume?
Yeah, to get Emperor Charles V to notice him.
Wow.
And Dinocrates. He dressed up as Hercules.
Seriously?
Yeah, to impress Alexander the Great.
That's amazing.
These were all calculated moves to create a memorable impression.
And make sure they were noticed.
Exactly.
And Barnum's hoaxes fit into that too.
They do.
It's all about strategically building a reputation.
Yeah.
Even if it means being a little controversial.
So it's about creating a distinct brand, whether it's through exceptional skill or a carefully crafted image.
I like that.
And Law 34, be royal in your own fashion, act like a king to be treated like one.
Okay.
That seems to build on this idea.
Yeah,
it's about projecting confidence and authority, even if you don't have an official title. The contrast between Louis Philippe, the so-called citizen king, and Napoleon's nephew, it really shows this.
How so?
Well, Louis Philippe tried to seem like an ordinary guy, wearing a plain hat and carrying an umbrella. At first, it might have seemed relatable, but people started to think he lacked the dignity of a leader.
They wanted someone who looked the part.
Exactly. They wanted someone with a royal presence.
I see.
And they ended up electing Napoleon's nephew.
Wow.
A guy no one really knew.
Yeah.
Because they hoped he would have that same powerful aura.
It's like they wanted a king, not just a guy.
Right.
So this shows how important it is for leaders to project a certain level of confidence and even a sense of destiny.
Yeah, how you carry yourself, the confidence you show.
Yeah.
It really affects how others treat you.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about using other people to achieve your goals. Law 7 is get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit.
Okay, that sounds a little...
It can be, but it's a classic power move.
Like how?
Well, there's the story of Basilius.
Okay.
He manipulated Emperor Michael III to get rid of Bardas.
Okay.
He convinced Michael that Bardas was a threat.
Right.
Then he arranged Bardas's assassination.
Oh, wow.
And then he conveniently took Bardas's place.
So he used someone else to remove an obstacle and then took advantage of the situation.
Exactly. And then you have Emperor Sung in China.
Right.
He took a less violent approach.
Okay.
He got rid of his powerful generals by offering them a comfortable retirement.
Clever.
It's a softer tactic,
Yeah.
but it achieves the same goal, getting rid of potential rivals without a direct confrontation.
Interesting.
So these examples show how you can delegate tasks and make sure you benefit from the efforts of others, even if you didn't do the work yourself.
Right.
The key is to position yourself to get the rewards.
Makes sense.
Law 8 is make other people come to you use bait if necessary. This seems like a more indirect way of exerting control.
It is.
More sophisticated, maybe.
I agree.
And Talleyrand's handling of Napoleon after his escape from Elba?
Oh, yeah.
That's a perfect example.
How so?
Well, instead of confronting Napoleon directly, which would have been really risky, Talleyrand set a trap.
A trap?
Yeah. He knew Napoleon's ego and his desire for glory would lead him to overreach and ultimately fail.
So he played on Napoleon's weaknesses.
Exactly.
Clever.
And then there's Brunelleschi.
Okay.
He pretended to be sick.
Really?
To force the officials in Florence to beg him to come back.
Why?
They had tried to undermine him by giving a big project to his rival Ghiberti. So he basically created a problem that only he could solve.
Well, they had to come crawling back to him.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And then there's Leonardo da Vinci's fable, The Nut and the Campanile.
I don't know that one.
It's a cautionary tale about how even small, insignificant things can have huge unintended consequences.
You never know what will snowball.
Right.
So don't underestimate anything.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, let's move into the tricky area of influence through association.
All right.
Law 10 is infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. Now that sounds a bit harsh, doesn't it?
It does sound a bit cold.
Like you're abandoning your friends when they need you.
Yeah.
But the law is more about the idea that negativity and bad luck can be contagious.
Oh, I see.
King Ludwig I Bavaria.
Okay.
He's a good example.
What?
His downfall was largely because of his relationship with Lola Montez.
Who was she?
She was a controversial figure, very volatile, and her presence caused a lot of unrest, which eventually led to the king's abdication.
Wow.
And she had a history of destructive relationships, too.
So it's like being around negative people can drag you down with them.
Exactly. It can affect you emotionally, but also your reputation and opportunities.
It's like guilt by association.
Yeah, people judge you based on who you hang out with.
Makes sense.
So this law is about setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Being mindful of who you surround yourself with.
Yeah. You have to protect
from negativity.
I agree.
And then there's Law 19. Know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person.
Okay.
Which seems like common sense.
It does.
But the book actually gives you a guide.
A guide?
Yeah, to identifying potentially dangerous people.
Oh, that's interesting.
It breaks them down into 3 types.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have the insecure type.
Okay.
They overreact to any perceived insult.
Right.
Then there's Mr. Suspicion.
Okay.
Always looking for hidden motives and conspiracies.
Yeah, I know the type.
And finally, the serpent with a long memory, who holds grudges forever.
Oh, yeah, those are the worst.
They are, and these aren't just personality quirks.
Right.
They're serious threats. You need to be very careful not to offend these types of people.
Because they can really hurt you.
They can, and it could come back to bite you later.
That's true.
So this is where emotional intelligence comes in.
Right.
You need to be observant and understand people's motivations.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to influence them.
Because not everyone reacts the same way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now let's talk about strategic detachment.
Sure.
Law 20 is do not commit to anyone. That sounds a little lonely, doesn't it?
It does.
Like you can't have real relationships.
Yeah.
But the law is more about maintaining your independence.
Okay.
So you have more flexibility and power.
I see.
Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay.
She's a great example of this.
How so?
She never got married.
Right. Yeah.
And she used that to her advantage
Okay.
by keeping the possibility of marriage open. She could forge alliances and maintain her power without being controlled by a husband.
Or any particular foreign power.
Exactly.
That's smart.
It is. And it's about keeping your options open so you can align yourself with different interests when it benefits you, mediate conflicts between others, and ultimately achieve your own goals.
That makes sense.
And a more modern example is Kissinger.
Okay.
He offered his services to both Nixon and Humphrey.
At the same time?
Yeah, during the election.
Really?
So no matter who won, he would have a position.
That's pretty pragmatic.
It is.
So this law is about balancing loyalty with strategic self-interest. Sometimes not committing can be the best move.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, Law 29 is plan all the way to the end, which is good advice in general.
It is.
Not just for power plays.
Right.
There's a story about the king of Tartary and a wise Sufi who told him, never begin anything until you have reflected what will be the end of it.
That's good advice.
It is.
You have to think ahead.
Yeah, and there's another story about a royal surgeon who avoided a trap by remembering that advice.
Wow.
So it's about thinking through the consequences, anticipating obstacles, and keeping your eye on the ultimate goal.
I see.
And Balboa's expedition to find El Dorado.
Okay.
It shows how important detailed planning is when you have a big goal in mind.
Makes sense.
And even the story of the altered windows in Senno Ricky's stone lantern.
What about them?
It shows how even a small detail can ruin the whole design.
If you don't consider the end goal.
Exactly.
So true influence is about long-term thinking.
It is.
Okay.
Let's shift gears now and talk about creating a captivating impression.
Right.
Law 30 is make your accomplishments seem effortless. This seems like it goes back to managing appearances.
It does.
Like Harry Houdini.
Oh, yeah.
His escape acts. They were incredible.
They were.
He made it look so easy. Right. But of course it wasn't.
It took a lot of work.
Tons of planning effort and clever mechanics. But he hid all that to make the impossible seem effortless.
It's called sprezzatura.
Sprezzatura.
Yeah, that's studied nonchalance.
Okay.
You make it look like you're not even trying.
I like that.
It makes your achievement seem even more amazing.
Because you're not showing how.